Hello and welcome to this week's video. My name is Anuska Taylor. Thank you so much for joining me and also for supporting my channel. It really does mean so much to me. So please do continue to like, share and subscribe. So this video today is for you if you'd like to really understand what it takes for a real vocal transformation. And it's probably not going to be what you expect me to say. So maybe you're someone that has tried voice coaching in the past. Maybe you've done some private voice coaching. Maybe you've done some group voice coaching. Maybe you've done some public speaking or presentation skills training. Maybe you've bought some books or watched some videos or got some free downloads, etc., etc. So you've tried a few things. Maybe you've got some increased insight into your voice. Maybe you've got a greater understanding of your voice, but actually maintaining these changes you found really challenging. And there could be a whole range of reasons why you found it hard to maintain the changes, but essentially nothing has really shifted in any sort of profound, meaningful way. So within a few weeks or months, you're kind of back to where you were before. So what's happening here? So I love this expression, which I didn't come up with actually. I heard someone say this the other week, not about voice, but about something else. But information isn't transformation. And it's taken me a long time to learn this myself because I am a lifelong learner. I've been studying voice for nearly 15 years now. I've been having voice lessons myself almost my entire life. I started doing speech and drama and then singing lessons. I've done Toastmasters courses. I've done so many things related to the voice. So I've kind of ticked all the boxes from a voice training perspective in that sense. So just having an intellectual understanding of your voice, of, oh, I need to do this, this, and this, because this and this is going to help this and this, is not going to change anything on a profound level. Yes, you do have to practice. Yes, you do have to do your exercises, do your warm-ups. Absolutely. Not saying you don't do that, but I'm saying if that's all you do, you will find that you struggle to maintain those vocal habits that you're trying to build. And it will only ever take you so far. Because truthfully, the real change happens in the unconscious. And by definition, we're not conscious of it because it's unconscious. It's not the pre-conscious where we have some understanding. Think about pre-conscious as like limiting beliefs. Most of us are aware of limiting beliefs that we have, but we're aware of them, so they're not unconscious. This is very much unconscious, so you won't even have the awareness of it. And that's what makes it so challenging to shift, because you don't even know what you're shifting. But if we are willing to go into the emotion that arises, that is where the transformation occurs. There is no transformation without emotion. It's so important. And from an ego perspective, it's death to us. We don't want to feel uncomfortable. I mean, this is human nature. We don't want to feel uncomfortable. We do everything in our power to avoid discomfort. And I don't mean sort of physical pain necessarily, like pushing yourself through something that's painful. I'm talking about feeling uncomfortable, feeling anxious, feeling nervous, feeling embarrassed, feeling ashamed. Whatever those feelings are, we do everything in our power to avoid feeling. And this is where the gold actually really lies, in the transformation of your voice. So just to reiterate, yes, you still need to do your exercises, do the physical side of it. Having an understanding of your voice is going to help, but it's only going to take you so far. So if you try and transform your voice without doing this deeper work, this is what you might experience. And so I'm just going to give you a few examples, and then you might be able to relate to some of this yourself. So the first one is you'll reach a plateau. Now, this is particularly for people like myself who've spent years studying voice, training their voice. So they already have a good understanding of their voice. And that was me. I had reached a plateau. I was very, very comfortable with what I was doing from a vocal perspective. And I just stayed in my comfort zone with everything that I did, from warm-ups and exercises through to the kinds of music that I sang. And I'm talking here more from a singing perspective, but you could apply this to your speaking voice as well. So I stayed very, very comfortable in everything that I did. And so I didn't really transcend. I stayed in this plateau for a long time. You may find that unlike someone like myself who will practice, but I might have got into a rut with my practice that you just don't practice. And you've always got a really good excuse not to practice. I hear this a lot with clients. Oh, I've been really busy and blah, 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 blah. But if you find it's always an excuse that you never have time, then you've got to look at that, because there's something that your ego is trying to protect you from. This is another really common one. You'll just practice the bits that you like. And I see this as well with people, you know, I'll give them a few things to do, and then I'll be like, well, have you done that? No, I didn't do that. I just did the other one. So they'll just do the ones that they like. Now, of course, it's like going to the gym and just working your biceps and not ever doing your triceps because you don't like it. And usually the things that we don't like are usually the uncomfortable things, the ones that are a bit more painful or a bit more uncomfortable in some way, or a bit more challenging. But of course, they're not going to get easier by not doing them. So it's the same with the voice. So we've got to sort of start to look at, really get curious, why do I never do XYZ, and why do I only do ABC in my practice? So this is another one. So if you do the practice, let's say, you might do it when you're kind of distracted. So I hear this a lot as well with clients, that they'll do it in the car. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing things in the car from a vocal perspective, but obviously when you're driving a car, hopefully your attention is more on the road than anything else. So you're not fully focused on what you're doing. And when you're learning something new, you really want to be focused on it. And so you can make sure that you're doing it to give you the greatest success. So if you're distracted because you're watching the road, then you're not going to be fully focused on it. So just notice again, do I actually carve out time for this, or do I try and do it when I'm distracted doing something else? Now, when you do become more comfortable with what you're doing and get better at doing it, then of course you can do it when you're in the shower or in the car. But I think initially you want to give yourself that time to really focus. Another big one is the resistance to this change can also show up in the body. So you may find that you start getting jaw ache or neck ache or throat tension or a tightness in the chest. And yes, again, that can all be pointing to how you're using your voice, of course, but often that can also be pointing to the ego's resistance to moving forward. So it's like, well, if I give her a really tight jaw, she won't do the jaw exercises, for example. She won't move her jaw when she speaks, and then her voice can't come out. As an example, it's very unconscious. So we have to remember as well that the body is really the voice of the unconscious. So it's always telling us things. This doesn't mean we don't respect our body. We do what we have to do. We take care of our body, but we also know it's trying to tell us something on a deeper level. The body doesn't lie. The voice doesn't lie. It's just most of the time we misinterpret what it's telling us. And there are other examples, but they're just some of the main examples that I have seen, not only in my own life, but with clients. But you'll probably find other things too. There'll be things that you know, very subtle, but you'll be sabotaging your success in some way. You won't allow yourself to move forward. So it's going to look different for different people, depending on what you're doing, your level of experience, etc., etc. But just start to pay attention to, where do I put the brakes on? So in my work, the way I view the voice is an outer expression of your inner world. And as I've said, most of the time our inner world is very unconscious to us. So we don't even really understand what it's trying to tell us. And for lots of people, they think their voice is just the way it is, but it's really a product of your conditioning. And particularly when the voice is limited, when it's not free, when it's not open, when it's not expansive and expressive, then you know that there is conditioning at play, putting the brakes on, limiting the voice in some way. And so these vocal habits that you've created are designed by the ego to keep you safe, to keep you in the status quo, to stop you sticking out too much. Or it could be the opposite. Maybe you want the attention, so you've got a really loud voice and you find it very hard to speak quietly, or you just speak very, very quietly and find it really difficult to have greater expression and greater dynamics. So it's going to show up differently for different people, but in some way your vocal habits are a total and a product of your conditioning. Now, of course, the conditioning is learnt, very, very powerful, but it is learned. We learn it from such a young age. We don't even remember learning it. And so it's very unconscious. But because it's learned, when we can bring awareness to it and start to go towards the emotion that's really underneath it, then we are free. Then we can start to integrate that we have been pushing away our whole life. And then we're free to use our voice however we want, versus I can only speak loud, I can only speak quiet, I can only speak fast, I can only speak slow. And that's a lot of the limiting language I hear people say to me all the time about their voice, when truthfully, you have everything open to you. These vocal habits are designed to help you survive in the world, to help you fit in. The conditioning is really a sum total of what you've been taught is acceptable, is not acceptable. You can do this, you can't do this. People like you when you do this, you get love when you do this, you don't get love when you do this, you get validated when you do this. So we learn. It's very, very, very unconscious, very subtle, happens over a long period of time. As I say, a lot of it is in childhood, so we don't even remember when those emotions have locked things into place. So of course, then when you come to voice coaching, it's going to challenge those beliefs that you've held consciously or unconsciously. It's going to challenge your self-concept about what you think is and isn't possible, who you are, what I can do, what I can't do, etc., etc. So that's all going to be going on in the unconscious. And the ego is going to resist. It's going to pull back, which is why when I was talking earlier about the practice or the not practice or the physical resistance that shows up, this is all the ego putting the brakes on, because it's like, no, I've created these vocal habits for a reason, and I'm damn well going to make sure you don't change anything here, because I know this keeps you safe. You speaking quietly keeps you safe. You being the loudest voice in the room keeps you safe, whatever it is for you. But when you feel like you lack variation and your voice doesn't have that freedom and that movement and that expression, then you know that you are being limited in some way by your conditioning. So when you start then doing the work, doing the practice, a lot of emotion is going to come up. Now, often we're not conscious of this emotion because we get so good, as adults particularly, of pushing away emotion, distracting ourselves with having the radio on, the TV on, listening to music, playing with our pets or our children, going for a walk, going to the gym, etc. We get very, very good at distracting ourselves, when in actual fact, if we could actually go into that emotion that we're trying to run away from, that's really where the gold is. And that's really where the gold is in your transformation for your voice. So I hate to break this to you, but your vocal transformation really lies in the uncomfortable emotions that you don't want to feel. So I'll give you an example, because there's many, many ways this can show up, many ways. And it's going to look different for different people, depending on your conditioning. So as an example, something I hear quite frequently from clients, particularly clients that struggle with expression. So their voice is very flat, their voice is very monotone, they have a very low pitch, they have minimal kind of variation and pitch movement and dynamics in their voice. It's just all very flat and monotone. And often they'll say to me, when we start doing the work around expression, that they feel uncomfortable about being perceived as too expressive. They don't want to be too much. They don't want to be perceived as over the top and showy and too much in the limelight and me, and look at me. And so they made this association between accessing greater expression and dynamics in their voice and being almost like a performer. And again, this is a judgment around the word performer, but using this kind of stereotypical view, perhaps performers like being in the limelight, they like to be looked at. So there is that sort of resistance, that inner resistance to, if I step into my full expression, people will perceive me as loving myself, loving the limelight, and in some way being a performer and thinking I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. Now you can see how that's going to limit the voice, because you're not going to allow yourself to become truly expressive if that's unconsciously what's driving your voice. But we've got to go below that, because just thinking, well, okay, well, I get it now. I understand intellectually. I don't want to be perceived as a performer, so I'm just not going to be expressive. And I'm just going to try and push through when I do my exercises. But you've really got to go below that. What is being a performer really about? So we can look at this in two ways. We can look at what emotions arise in us when we are triggered by people in the outside world who are full of themselves, who are a performer, who love everyone to look at them. So what emotions come up for you? Using this example, if you were, say, in a meeting and there's always someone that has to dominate and talk over everyone and has to have the biggest voice in the room, what emotions come up for you? That's where you have to start, because there's something in that emotion that's stopping you from accessing your full expression. The other way we can do it as well is, and this is much sort of trickier for the ego because we prefer sort of projecting it out onto other people, but actually forcing yourself to go out there and be expressive. Go out there and use your voice in a way you would never use your voice. Become far more dynamic, utilize more pitch variation when you speak, and notice the emotion that comes up. What is it really about? You know, that what is it that you're really scared of that people might perceive you to think? And you've got to keep peeling back the layers, because remember, the ego doesn't want you to discover this. It's pushed it away your entire life. It's kept you safe. It's kept you in this nice safe box. I'm just going to keep your voice very sort of flying under the radar, so it's not too expressive, so you don't draw too much attention to yourself. Now we're trying to take the lid off the box, and the ego is going to do everything it can to try and put the lid back on. So you've really got to start to explore the emotion that comes up. Now, this is going to be different for different people. Let's say, for example, you're in a meeting and you decided, okay, I'm going to go for this. I'm going to be more expressive. And maybe you use your voice in a new way, and people maybe make a comment and say, oh, what's happened to your voice today? You sound a bit more energetic, a bit more lively. And just notice the feeling that comes up. Do you feel embarrassed? Do you feel ashamed? Do you feel like you just want to hide? Like, notice the feeling that comes up, because that's where you've got to start. Usually it's just something to do with what people will think of us. You know, will they think that I'm full of myself, and who does she think she is? So you just start to peel back the onion, peel back the layers. Okay, well, let's say someone does think you're full of yourself. That's just their interpretation anyway. And again, we can't see anything outside of our own mind. So whatever anyone is projecting onto you is coming from their own mind, and vice versa. What we see in the world is coming from our own mind. So we can't get outside our own mind. There is no objective reality. We're always seeing the world through the filters of our own mind. And I think when we remember that, then whatever people are saying is really on some level what we think about ourselves already. So we can't really, in that sense, be sort of hurt by what people say, because if it triggers us in any way, it's because on some level we agree with them, but probably unconsciously. So just start to notice, what are the emotions that come up when I take the action, whatever it is for you. So when you take that action to be more expressive, what emotion comes up? Or what emotions arise in you when you see people out in the world that are very expressive? Do you find them annoying? Do you find them full of themselves? Do you find them irritating? And start to peel back the layers. What's the worst case scenario? And keep going and keep going, because normally it's got nothing to do with what you think it's to do with. And then you could start to integrate it. You can start to say, okay, I want to choose to bring a little bit more expression into my voice. And I'm not afraid to be perceived maybe as a bit showy, because again, I recognize that people are going to project onto me their own stuff, just like I project onto them my stuff. So when we start to see the world as just everyone's projecting, then there really is nothing to fear. But we do have to go into the emotion. And by that, I mean, you have to be willing to sit with it. Whatever comes up for you, maybe your heart's going, maybe you've got butterflies in your stomach, maybe your throat tightens, whatever the sort of physical symptoms of that feeling are, you have to be willing to go with it And as I say, what most of us do is we run away, we hide, we don't want to feel it. Let me just go and distract myself. Let me just go and complain to my friend about my boss or whatever. Let me just go and get out of this situation. But can you be in that situation knowing that in some way that is a reflection of your own mind and what's in you and nothing to do with the external? Really hard for the ego to accept because it loves to project everything out there, but it really is the key to freedom, and it's the key to your vocal freedom, because then you are truly free to show up however you want versus I have to use my voice in this very specific way that I've been taught is acceptable or not acceptable. And just as a final point as well, you don't also want to just go to the other extreme, because then you're still pushing it away. So let's say, for example, and I see this a lot on social media, you know, you might have people to be like, you know, stuff them, I'm just going to do what I want to do. But there's still that defensive quality to it, which means, you know, the ego is hooked in. When we're truly free, there is no defensiveness around it. It's like, I choose, it's a choice versus I have to do this, I need to do this. If I don't do this, I'm going to feel like I'm going to die. It's a choice. It's a choice how you show up, and it's a choice how you use your voice. So I hope that's helped. If you have any questions or comments, please do post them below. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do subscribe. It makes such a difference to getting my videos out there. And I do release a new video every single week. So have a great week, and I will see you next time.